Hello and welcome to the Supernatural track here at Continual. I'm your host, Gail Z. Martin, and tonight we are talking about the hierarchies of hell, who ruled hell and who did it best, and all that wonderful intrigue. But before we launch into that, let's let our wonderful panelists introduce themselves, starting with Kristin.
Hi, I'm Kristin Jackson. I'm a graphic designer. I work in the film industry, and I've been a fan of Supernatural since the very beginning. And I had the privilege of being able to work with some of the behind-the-scenes people who worked on the show, and got to visit the sets a few times. And really, this show changed my life. It has meant a lot to me, and I'm very happy to be a part of this continuation of my love of the show with Gail. Thanks.
Elektra.
I'm Elektra Hammond. I'm a writer and an editor, and like Kristin, I've been a fan of the show since the very beginning. Unlike Kristin, I've had to watch it all just sitting in my living room watching the TV. I'm so jealous.
And I'm Gail Z. Martin and Morgan Bryce. As Gail, I write epic and urban fantasy. As Morgan, I write urban fantasy, male paranormal romance. But all my modern worlds are ones where Sam and Dean could walk in and feel right at home. I came late to the party, halfway through season 11. Binge watched all 11 seasons in time for the start of season 12. And I think since then I have made it up for a slow start with obsessive fervor. So I run the Supernatural TFWNC group. I run the Supernatural track here at Continual. I wrote a chapter for Lynn Zubernis' There'll Be Peace When You Are Done. And I'm a staff columnist for the Winchester Family Business blog. So yes, Supernatural is kind of my life. Let's talk about hell. It's so much more interesting than we were ever led to believe before Supernatural. All the intrigue, all the drama. So
the decorating.
And the redecorating, yes.
The window treatments. Oh, sorry.
And then the new soul reception. But we get ahead of ourselves. So who do you think ran hell best? Kristin?
For me, it'd absolutely be Crowley. He had style. Crowley had style. He had a vision for what he wanted to do with hell. Lucifer was just kind of letting things go their evil ways, a more traditional take on hell. But Crowley had, the thing of people waiting in endless lines forever, that would be, I think, pretty much everybody's version of a good punishment in hell. So yeah, I like Crowley.
Okay. Elektra.
I'll agree that I adore Crowley and I love him best. But as far as running hell, I think Rowena had it down pat. I think that she ran a tight ship, and people snapped too when she looked at them. She had it down pat. As Gail said, receptions for new souls coming in. We do that now. And everything just seemed spit polished when she started running things. And nobody saw that coming, but damn, she was good at it.
That's a good point, that Rowena kind of had a woman's touch for it, that she saw the relationships, and as important to foster devotion among your followers, and then you don't have little civil uprisings happening behind you when you take your eyes off people. So Crowley, he had the idea of like a CEO type of mentality, but Rowena was more of the empathetic leader that people chose to follow by choice, as opposed to being forced into it like Crowley. So that's a very good point. And of course, she had
power to enforce what she wanted. The fist in the velvet glove. But she was more of the velvet glove type than Crowley.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
So let's just go straight to it. Who was your least favorite ruler of hell? Elektra?
Oh God. the Kentucky Fried Colonel guy,
Asmodeus.
Asmodeus.
That's
He,
him.
I just didn't like him. He was the guy you love to hate. And he too had his idea of how he wanted things to run. And if you crossed him, that was it. You were gone. He was going to do things his way. And by the time he came to power, I was used to seeing things done a certain way. And I had really liked Crowley. And he was so no nonsense. He just was abrasive for me, just a little bit too much with the, oh yeah, I don't want to fool with these Winchester guys. I'm just going to put on my sparkly white suit and I'm going to go up there and let's have another apocalypse. You know, I want to rule the galaxy or the universe, he was just a bit too much.
Okay, Kristin?
Yeah, I agree with Elektra. Asmodeus was not my favorite person. Yeah, and it's just, it was his manner. He just really grated on me. I didn't have the sympathetic connection to him like I'd like to have to villains. I couldn't see where he was coming from. Usually I like to, you know, with whether it was Meg or you know, any of the other great villains that Sam and Dean dealt with over the years, there was some reason for why they were doing things the way they did. Even Lucifer, you know, you knew why he was doing what he was doing. Asmodeus, I was like, what is that guy's problem? Seriously. It's like he was just a straight villain. And he was a, you know, a fun villain to watch, but I didn't have the emotional connection to him. So, you know, seeing him gone didn't bother me a bit.
I think the thing that creeped me out with Asmodeus, and I'm sure it was intentional, was he so channeled the callous Southern plantation owner who wielded the power of life and death over people that he owned. And he really played that to the hilt. And it, I think because it had roots in reality, it creeped me out in some ways more than some of the purely made up stuff did. What's funny is I saw Jeffrey Vincent Parise at one of the supernatural conventions, and he is just a lovely person, and he was so funny, and he is a drummer, and he talked about, you know, meditation and Zen. He was, you know, so different from the character that he played. But so I give him real credit for playing something that was completely against type.
Mm-hmm.
Now we've had some drop-ins,
and he had to step into big shoes too.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, he had to kind of go up against the different rulers of hell that had come before, the Crowley and the Lucifer, who are big personalities, and had such a huge presence in the series. That, you know, you're the guy that just kind of comes in, and now you're kind of standing in, sort of like when what's his name, that sort of was stunt casting for Lucifer, the musician guy. Yeah,
no, Rick Springfield.
Rick Springfield, that's it. You know, you're trying to fill some really big shoes there. So, you know, Mark Pellegrino is very hard to top in the Lucifer category. So Asmodeus kind of coming in, we had a lot of expectations of maybe what sort of person he was going to be. And like you said, Gail, with a, you know, coming back to a very stereotypical reality connection, it didn't, I don't think it worked as well as the other guys.
You know, we had that one episode where he was trying to get Jack to raise the Shadim, and we never came back to that again. And I was always fascinated by, well, you know, what would have happened? Are they still down there? You know, what about them? I kept waiting for someone else to bring them up, and that was just one of those things that got lost along the way. So now we had one of the other temporary rulers of hell, of course, was Cassifier. When Cass took on Lucifer in season 11 and ends up down there with Misha trying to do all of Mark Pellegrino's facial expressions. Thoughts about Cassifier?
I have not refreshed my memory with season 11, so for me, I'm not I'm not even remembering
Okay.
Cassifier as one of the people. Sorry, guys. That's, yeah, shoot, now I need to go see if I can run upstairs and watch my watch Netflix to see what happened with that particular version of Cass, of which there were a great many.
Mm-hmm. Elektra?
Yeah.
I don't remember a lot of what he did, but I do remember being really impressed by Misha's abilities to pull off us believing that it was Pellegrino's version of Lucifer. Misha manages to do that with a lot of different characters. And it's every time I watch it through, I am astounded by his ability to channel different people.
Mhm.
And you can believe that there are different people inhabiting him. It's uncanny in some ways.
Yeah, he definitely had a lot of Pellegrino's facial expressions and mannerisms down pat that were a little creepy to see on his face because he did it so well. It was very unsettling.
It was like when he briefly was the Leviathan vessel. Yeah, Misha can get pretty dramatically scary very quickly.
That was creepy. That was super creepy.
Yeah.
Now,
Yeah,
one thing that, oh, go ahead.
Oh, well, I was wondering, the Leviathans weren't really denizens of hell, were they? They were of evil force, but they wouldn't be in the hierarchy of the hell side of things, were they?
God was so I won't say frightened of them, but he pushed them aside into purgatory and locked them there.
So
oh, look, I've created something that only eats. Maybe this wasn't my best idea. Let's put them over here. Yeah.
So, yes, so they're separate from the rest of, because talking about the hierarchy, they would not be considered part of that hierarchy.
Well, there was Lucifer, who got locked up for a while before the apocalypse let him loose. And below him were the princes and then the knights. And then everybody else that had kind of a free-for-all over who was running things.
Mhm.
And most of the princes weren't interested other than Asmodeus.
Mhm.
Yeah, the prince, I really wish we could have seen more of Ramiel and Dagon. We only got little glimpses of them. They were only in, I think Ramiel was only in one episode. And he just wanted to go fishing. And Dagon was in a couple of them. But
I think of his locker in hell just has a sign on it that says "Gone Fishing."
Gone fishing.
And I just thought that could have been an interesting thread where we got so much of the angels and demon war kind of things that went on and on and on and on and on. And it was like, oh, look, we could do Princess of Hell. Oh, they're gone. Oh, well, it was a missed opportunity to do something maybe a little fresher. We had a lot of heaven and hell battles that just kind of dragged on. So personally, I would have loved to have seen more of the princes or princesses of hell. Any thoughts on their, albeit brief, appearances?
I'll agree. I certainly enjoyed whatever I saw of Dagon, much as she was pretty focused on the whole "I want control of Jack" thing. And I will get control of him, as soon as he's born, he's mine. And Ramiel was pretty much, well, she wants him, so I'm going to support her in that. But I just want to hang out and go fishing. But she was kind of an interesting character. And they used her to take the cult off the board. Because I guess they realized that they had limited themselves to saying, well, the cult can pretty much kill anything.
Yeah.
So we're going to take it off the board so that they have to work harder.
Yeah. We got her in the Devil Baby Mama drama season.
Yeah, and with those whole series of episodes, I really was hoping that Supernatural was not going to go down the terrible path of introducing a kid to the storyline to make things interesting. And the way they handled it ended up, I was like, okay, I am totally cool with this. This is brilliant, because usually when you inject a third member, a child character, that's when the show is circling the drain. So
Cousin Oscar, for those who remember the Brady Bunch. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Poor Oscar.
Well, or you end up with Will Wheaton on Star Trek.
Oh, God. Oh, dear.
Well, and I think that
paid for that.
Hmm?
He still
What'd
gets
you say?
paid for that. There are still people who don't like him because they don't like his character and how he was written on Star Trek.
And he's like in his 40s now. So yes, Phantom has a long memory.
With
Yeah.
2 kids of his own that I think are older than that.
Well,
But
and I think the CW found
sorry.
itself in an odd place because their lead actors aged out of their demographic. And, so we ended up with the drippy teenagers for a couple of episodes that I was hoping wouldn't come back, and they didn't finally. And then Jack for the last several seasons. And I think Alex Calvert did a great job with Jack, who, by the way, as Belphegor, had his own shot at ruling hell. So,
Briefly. Thank
briefly.
God.
Yes.
Before we had the princess, we had the knights.
Mhm.
And we had the whole back and forth with Abaddon versus Crowley. Which side are you going to take? And the 2 of them trying to convince demons, well, do you want to be on my team? Which team? Remember that whole runabout?
Sure.
Oh, that was
Well,
wonderful.
And then we had Dean as a Knight of Hell, and Cain, who had been Knights of Hell. And that was an interesting standoff as well. Cain's really one of my favorite characters. It was played so well. But Mark of Cain, Dean was pretty interesting too.
Yeah.
And Demon Dean was wonderful. And some of my favorite episodes are Dean and Crowley running around drinking and having a good time.
Wearing similar outfits too.
They couldn't sustain that.
And now we know just how much Jensen was acting to sing that badly at karaoke.
Yeah, very true. Yeah.
It's so good. Yeah. Well, and let's not forget Lilith. We had Lilith in there as a real player for quite a bit. She wasn't a knight. She wasn't a prince, but she was an entity that
she was the first demon created by Lucifer, and therefore she was the last seal. So she had a destiny, and it wasn't a very good one. Life kind of sucked for her that way.
Yeah.
But I think that the times that she showed up as a child were some of the most terrifying depictions, because whoever those child actresses were, especially the one in the house with the grandparents where she had her birthday every day, that kid just scared the bejeebers out of me because she did that so well. And she was so young to be so scary.
That was very Billy Mooney.
Yeah.
From Twilight
Oh,
Zone.
yes.
That was that. Every time I see that episode, that's the way he looked when he was young, and the way he played that just always come to mind. The kid that terrified his family because he made them go away. They were all just scared of him.
Yeah,
And yet
I guess
he grew up into a perfectly reasonable human being.
yeah, it takes for child actors, to me, those you know, when you have a possessed child or a demon child or something, those are, you could really play scary a lot better, because your mindset of what a kid is 100% different, or, you know, the total opposite of how they're playing. So it really kind of strikes a core inside of you when they find a kid that can really channel a, you know, a terrible demon, or just, you know, some like an evil that is unintentionally evil, like Jesse. You know, he was doing terrible things by just the power of his wishing, you know, how he thought things should go. And that was kind of very threatening, because you don't know what that kid is going to imagine next. And kids have very active imaginations. So
Kids nowadays,
would Jesse have kind of fallen into the hierarchy of hell because he was the Antichrist? Or is he just like a Lilith, kind of outside of that?
If you go with the dispensationalist tradition that they mined extensively for supernatural, which is where you get all the seals and the Whore of Babylon and all of that, which is an interpretation pulled from Revelation and some of the prophetic books in the Old Testament, like Ezekiel and Daniel. Yeah, the Antichrist would definitely have been part of the unholy trinity if Jesse had stuck around, and they'd have wanted to play it that way. But he's in apparently Australia, which is where you go when you want to disappear. It's like being in Australia, I guess. I don't know where people from. I don't know where superpowered beings in Australia go to disappear. Finland? I mean, you know,
the outback.
Finland.
They go into they go walkabout.
And just don't come back.
Yeah, just didn't come back.
There's a lot of Australia that's very not populated.
This is true.
So they just go walkabout, hang out in the interior, and no one sees them. You know, if no one sees them, are they still there?
Is there no cell service out there? Then they can never get a call. You know, one thing I liked about hell that was different than the hierarchy of heaven was that people in hell could move around. They could kind of change their initial, you know, ranking within hell. They could move up. They had promotion abilities, flexibility, whereas heaven was very static, very rigid, very regimented. So that kind of made hell a little bit more interesting, because people can move around, and they were welcome to move around. Whereas heaven, it was kind of like, you stay in your lane, and you don't not follow orders. You know, hell had orders, but they could be demons and just say, screw you. I'm not going to follow this. Whereas the angels were kind of, you know, if somebody told them to do something, they were obligated to do it. They didn't have that free will that demons seem to possess.
Which was interesting, because they, you know, the demons could, like you said, you know, move up. Crowley started as a crossroads demon. And while he didn't have to battle for the title of King of Hell, Ramiel said, okay, I don't want this, which of you wants it? And he jumped in first. You could show yourself to be particularly useful or enterprising, and as long as you didn't threaten the current ruler, you could make out pretty well. Elektra, you were going to say something.
They made it clear earlier, before they really got into the hierarchy of hell, that when Dean finally started talking about his time in hell, how he was offered, you know, relief from being tortured if only he would torture people. But there were human souls in hell, and there were demons, and it wasn't really made clear, because, I mean, I guess you could be a human torturing other humans, but there wasn't any sort of promotional track for people, for human souls, just for the demons. And hell didn't seem to run on, say, we need a certain amount of demon power to keep this place going. They seemed fine. heaven had all of these problems with, we've only got so many angels and we're running out of angels and heaven's power's failing. And God, the color scheme up there was always white, white, and more white. I mean, hell was constantly being redecorated.
Mhm.
It was
Well, I think that
more
goes,
in place.
yeah, I think that goes back to the comment that there's a stairway to heaven and a highway to hell, which gives you an idea of relative traffic movement. So maybe there was just enough influx of new souls to hell that they never had to worry. And Ruby had told Dean that humans eventually became demons after they were there long enough. So, you know, maybe it was the kind of promotional thing. After you were there long enough and broke and tortured, then your promotion was to become a demon.
Mhm. Like once your humanity is completely stripped away, what's left is the demon, and then the demon can kind of choose his own path, you know, like if Crowley just died and was an awful person, so he first went to hell just as a human soul, he would be probably someone who had a very short a short time in there as a human before he became, you know, a demon with upward mobility. And
But
do
he
we ever
wasn't
figure?
a human who went to hell. He sold his soul.
Oh, he sold himself. That's right.
Yes,
That's
he
right.
sold his soul for
For
2
extra, yeah. Well, and did we ever figure out what type of demon he was? Because he had the red eyes that nobody else seemed to have. He was like very different in his abilities and what he was able to do
And the
versus
red
the others.
smoke as well.
Yeah. So he was like a unique individual within hell. You know,
Did he
where
have
he
that?
fell in the hierarchy is like he was all over the place.
Did he have that when he first started?
Yeah,
Because I mean, he
that's-
started and he was the head of the Crossroads
Mhm.
for a long time, and nobody appreciated him because he was a bureaucrat. And he
Mhm.
didn't become the king of hell till that business with Ramiel. Does some of that come with being in charge of hell? Do you get access to more power?
Maybe.
That's a good point.
Now, we also had some people who were, runners up, like the guy who in season 14, the big bar fight where he captures Cass and tries to become the next king of hell. And we get Sam laying down the line that there will be no new king of hell. That guy had, he had big dreams, didn't really work out for him.
Yeah. There were quite a few hell adjacent individuals throughout Supernatural.
We also had the
Yeah.
guy who got Dean and Sam to break into the relic hoarders lair and steal back the trunk with his bones because he was looking for an upgrade.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And, you know, with the hierarchy, when witches died, unlike Rowena, they probably went in as humans, but they probably also be some of the more powerful demons. They would end up because they had the magic juice. Whereas it seemed like regular demons could blink in and out if you called them or if you summoned them. But Crowley seemed independent, that he could just blink in and out just on his own without being summoned. There were some that seemed to have a little more free ability. So maybe the ones that have more free abilities or more powers, demon powers, were maybe they started out more powerful to begin with, like they were witches or wizards or something.
Now, the one we haven't talked about is Zazel. The Yellow Eyes, the guy who started the whole thing. And of course, he had in mind a rebellion against Lucifer. So he wanted to get a champion so he could raise an army and take over hell.
Well, in the beginning, when Supernatural began, Lucifer was in the cage or was locked up somewhere. And I think Azazel was pretty much running things. He just wasn't the king, because Lucifer was still the king, even though he was locked up. And Zazel was a knight of hell, I think.
I think so, yeah.
Yeah, he had the yellow eyes, so he was one of the knights. And yeah, he had a plan. He had a vision. Yeah, and he was working long term, because that always works out well. If you stretch it out for too long, something's always gonna go wrong.
And
Now-
he was corrupting human souls before they even went to hell.
Yeah.
With the special kids. So within the hierarchy, then I guess there's humans out there that can be corrupted or part of the hierarchy, even though they have never set foot in hell and not died at that point. So,
Well, I just watched Beyond the Mat last night, season 11, and Gunnar, the wrestler, was helping a demon to forestall his going to hell with the Hellhound for having made a deal. So I think he'd have fallen into that category that you're talking about, Kristin, where somebody is has managed to kind of come up with a subcategory of demonic helper to keep from being puppy chow.
There was also the fella who was gathering souls, and he was making contracts and then collecting on them early because he thought he found a loophole. And Crowley tore into him pretty good about if people don't believe that we're going to give them the actual 10 years, no one will sign up anymore. You know, may give you some short-term gains, but we're in this for the long haul. We're going to be around for a while.
The importance of consumer confidence.
expert marketing.
That has seen some play definitely in fan fiction, but the show didn't really follow it to its interesting conclusion. And I had read somewhere that had there not been the writer's strike in season 3, we would have seen Sam embrace his destiny as the boy king of hell, or at least go further down that path. And then we ended up with a short season and the writer's strike. But I've always been intrigued, particularly with the plot threads of, so Lilith takes Dean to hell, and Sam flips the switches and walks into hell like he owns it and brings his brother out. You know, that could have been a really interesting way to go.
I am really curious about Azazel's plan was to get these kids juiced up on demon blood so that they would be powerful enough to break, to kill Lilith and break Lucifer out so Lucifer could be in charge.
Yeah.
That was a really bad plan for him. Or did that just end up being the product of rewrites eventually? But that's where Sam ended up, was juiced up enough on demon blood to accidentally release Lucifer.
Yeah.
And if Zazel wanted to end up being in charge, that was a bad plan.
I thought the demon blood was meant so his vessel would not explode when Lucifer took it over. That kind of strengthened his vessel.
Well, I think that was Lilith's plan, but I think Azazel was looking to create a general for his army. And so was he looking for a general for an army that would put him on the throne? Was he looking truly for, if Sam was supposed to be the boy king of hell, that would have suggested that Sam would have become the person in charge, and then Azazel would have been his first lieutenant,
or the man behind the throne, or demon
which is
behind the
safe.
throne.
So demon blood, very all-purpose.
Yeah.
And they hadn't figured out
good for
about
phone calls. You can make a phone call with it.
Oh yeah, and they obviously had not figured out about the sort of Lucifer's vessel thing, early on enough to realize making him the boy king of hell was incompatible with saying he was also Lucifer's perfect vessel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
It probably was a season 3 thing, like you were saying, that they had to do a quick, think of how can we get from here to there? Because didn't Kripke he had like a definite ending that so how do we kind of work around this new shortened season to get from here to there? Maybe that was some of the stuff that they cut out because they just knew they didn't have enough time to play it out.
Well, we were 7 episodes short on season 3. We only had 16 episodes in season 3 compared to the usual 20 to 23.
Mm-hmm.
So 7 episodes is enough for a big arc.
Yeah.
That never happened.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
That's a lot of stuff.
Do hellhounds fall into the hierarchy in a demon capacity? Because I'm thinking why I'm saying that is because in the Fae mythology that sometimes those supernatural spirit dogs that go with the wild hunt are souls. They're not dogs, actual dogs. So I'm wondering, it made me wonder, just randomly, I wonder if the hellhounds are a form of soul that is a hound, sort of like the Fae.
Interesting. Well, and going back to the demon blood, we also had an interesting question there at the end in the episode where they raise Lucifer. Ruby tells Sam he never needed a feather to fly. He didn't need the demon blood to really awaken his psychic abilities. Mm-hmm. So were the psychic abilities just from Zazel dripping the blood in his mouth as a child? Would he have had them anyhow? Why did they go away all of a sudden? I guess he never really had them again after he came back from the pit when he went in with Lucifer and Adam. But there were some interesting questions raised there. And then I'm not sure that Michael and Adam really belong in the hierarchy of hell, but they spend an awful lot of time in the cage. So where do we put them?
Yeah. They came to an understanding, so that was nice.
Right, but Michael's still an archangel.
Yeah.
And he was just locked in the cage, keeping track of locked in the cage with Lucifer, keeping track of one another. Mm-hmm. It's the traditional, I will suffer through being locked up with my enemy if I can keep my enemy from doing something I don't want him to do. Mm-hmm. That's an old recycled plot from if nothing else, Star Trek did it a long time ago, but it's a very old cliche plot with the, you and I are the last two, and we're going to get locked up somewhere together forever, fighting with each other because it will stop the world from exploding.
Oh, I know what episode you're talking about. I just got a flashback.
Half black on one side and half white on the other.
Yep. Yeah. Except I'm not sure it was ever Michael's plan to go into the cage. Sam grabbed him on the way down and dragged him in. So I'm not sure that Michael ever intended to be Lucifer's, jailer. Mm-hmm. He wanted to have the big fight and destroy the planet. So he kind of didn't get what he was hoping for.
He ended up literally being his brother's keeper in that case. Keeper in a cage.
And they batted around Sam's soul for a while because they had it to play with and it was just there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So what have we not covered? Anybody else on your list of hierarchies? Who did we miss?
Who else ran hell?
Hell was a busy place.
We didn't talk about Abaddon a whole lot.
That's true. Mm-hmm.
We certainly didn't talk about Crowley enough. I could do Crowley all day.
Yeah, he is so good. Mark Shepard inhabits that role so well, and you're good, but I'm Crowley. Mm-hmm. I mean, he was so terrific in that role.
You're just the king of the crossroads. was the king of the
Was.
cross, now king of hell. He was
Yeah.
spectacular at it, and just the cell phone that said, not moose.
Yeah. Yeah, little details.
The details were spectacular for all of his interactions with the boys. And
Mhm. Yeah. And well, when you mentioned Abaddon, that's another sort of demon or demon-esque character that seemed to have powers that were outside of what normal demons had. Because remember when she had her hands cut off, and her hand independently did a cousin it thing, or a
well,
thing, and marched itself across the table. And I was like, that is that is some seriously creepy.
she was the first knight of hell they went into, and they did not realize how powerful she was.
Mm-hmm.
And they were figuring out how to deal with something that powerful. And they thought they had it covered. The things like, the devil's trap bullet in her head. Well, that's keeping her from doing anything. And we cut off her hands, and they just didn't realize that she was telekinetic. And why did they bring her back? They had her all in little pieces, buried, or wherever it was they had her locked up, never to return. And they needed a demon, so they brought her back.
Mm-hmm.
They could have used any other demon, but no, let's get the most powerful one we've ever seen and use her.
What could possibly go wrong?
Yeah, exactly. I think that could be the subtitle for the show. Supernatural, what could possibly go wrong?
We're not going to sew her hands back on because she doesn't need them, but we'll bring them to the room just in case, and then we'll leave her there alone.
To take a phone call. Yeah.
We'll take a phone call and leave her with no one guarding her, because what could possibly go wrong? Yeah.
Yeah, that was a unique escape too.
Mm-hmm.
That was creative. I give props to the guys for thinking about how can we get her out of such a predicament. Well, have her hand kind of march across the table and dig out the bullet. Yeah, I mean that was some pretty creative storytelling with her.
Oh,
and she was fun too. She was, I mean, in the scale of characters from hell, she was one of the more fun ones, entertaining.
Well, they introduced her particularly well, because they brought Grandpa back to the old clubhouse to figure out what was going on, and she followed them. And she came in, and that was where she picked up the devil made me do it t-shirt.
Mm-hmm.
And she was just, everything they did, she would go into somebody, and she had that little trick of tossing a little bit of demon smoke into somebody and then getting it back, and she would see everything they'd seen.
Mm-hmm.
And that was a great trick nobody else could do either.
Mm-hmm.
She had some really good powers. They said, hey, we've got a super demon, we're going to give her good stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And that was really nice. They made her more powerful in interesting ways.
So yeah. Crowley kind of had a bit of that too, where he could send his demon smoke out to help fight the battle inside of Sam's head to get him to, to want to live, and then exit that same way. So he kind of had a knight-ish qualities as we went on later in the seasons, that he kind of either, I don't know, like you said, he was either absorbing more powers because of his status in hell, or he just picked up tricks along the way.
Or maybe he picked up some stuff from when people died too. I have no idea how demons work. Maybe you get more powers when you kill powerful demons. We've seen that kind of thing in other mythoses. Why not this one?
Yeah.
I killed the Knight of Hell, I get their powers.
Makes sense.
Yeah.
Well, folks, we have blown through our time. So as we wrap up here, let's tell everybody where they can find you online, and starting with Elektra.
I'm Elektra Hammond. You can find me at untilmidnight.com. It's got links to everything.
And Kristin.
I mostly hang out on Twitter. My username is Anicat. So it's ANICAT. Pretty easy to remember. Yeah, if you want to follow, I'd love to meet you.
And I'm pretty easy to find at gailzmartin.com, morganbryce.com. All the social media accounts are variations of those names, but mostly I hang out here on Continual. So thank you to our wonderful, wonderful panelists tonight for a great conversation about the hierarchies of hell. And thanks to all of you for watching and listening. There'll be more Supernatural coming up soon, so we'll see you online.